it'd be great if you could briefly introduce yourselves and talk to people about what you do. Thank you.
Okay. So my name is Erin Grover, and I have a company called Altai Digital Capital. Pretty much, it's a fund-to-fund structure out of Ireland that does placement of client funds onto highly vetted trading algorithms. So I'm sure a lot of you know that, using trading algorithms right now in the volatile market can be very profitable. So I have an amazing team that helps me to vet each product, and every product that we place clients onto is regulated. So also I'm a part of the Akasha Innovation Hub, which is an accelerator based out of Dublin for all things blockchain and blockchain for the greater good in the world. Akasha was originally founded by Mihai Alisi, who helped to co-found Ethereum in the early days with Vitalik Buterin. So I'm lucky to be a part of that, and they have multiple hubs around the world in Barcelona, Berlin, and Zug as well.
Thank you. Kevin.
Thank you very much. Kevin Montserrat, founder of Consilience Ventures, co-founder of Consilience Ventures. My background is economics, and I basically joined Microsoft Ventures in 2014-15 when it was very much the early days of corporate accelerator programs, and I get to work with a lot of high growth companies, typically around Series A and Series B, and help them with customer access, obviously capital access and talent access. So I built the whole venture ecosystem for Microsoft Europe, and in 2017, 2018, I thought maybe there's a better way to actually accelerate startups. And then I asked myself, what if we could create an environment where young startups focusing on real long-term value, long-term impact companies could get access to a network of people they wouldn't have access to otherwise, and they could get access to money on demand. And that's what we have created. We have tokenized a venture capital ecosystem composed of startups, experts, and investors coming together in one single marketplace, and we invest in Series A, Series B rounds across the world right now, focusing on Europe, but we've got the capacity to scale because at the core of that, there's a tech company.
So, Kevin, you've done more than introduce yourself. You've told us all about what you've created. But so I'd like to follow up on that because in conversations that we've had previously, you've really spoken about the current VC models not really being fit for purpose, and that what you're trying to do is create a new model for VC. So I'd love you to just talk a little bit about what were the key problems in the traditional VC model, and then exactly how you're solving them with the model that you're working on.
Sure, thank you. So I guess the venture capital model is, for us, not very sustainable. You raise a fund, you sell it, you raise another fund, you sell it, and so on and so forth. And the money is very much still very centralized. At the end, we need the money to be decentralized so that there's more innovators and entrepreneurs having access to capital so that they can create great tech companies and solve real problems. So the main problem we're solving is a systemic problem. It's called alignment. The GPs, the VCs, and the startups are not fully aligned, and the VC is not very much aligned with its own limited partners as well. So the alignment is really much what we are solving, and we are solving this by creating the currency of entrepreneurs, which is backed by the portfolio that we are investing in, that we are growing. So that's how
you're solving the alignment problem. It seems to me you're also solving one of the other big problems that startups have, which is they have to spend all their time going and finding capital.
Yep.
So just talk a little bit about that aspect.
Sure, very briefly, raising money takes at least 6 to 9 months, and the problem is that once you've got the money in the bank, then you need to know what to do with it. And because the startup ecosystem globally is a comedy show, then raising money is easy, but managing money is a different story. So it's good if you are based in the UK and if you've got an SCIS insured business, because you will find the money, but that doesn't mean that you are going to be able to create a successful business. So what we have created is basically an environment where you can get access access. You can convert your shares into the currency of entrepreneurs at any time, so long as you are meeting the criteria we would like you to meet in order to show progress. And that's how we solved it.
Thanks. So that's alignment of people and money. Erin, I'd love to hear a little bit more from you, both how your model works and whether you sort of find some resonance with what Kevin's saying in terms of needing to solve some of these traditional VC problems.
Yes, so I have been on both sides of the fence. My first and second crypto trading companies were accelerated by the Akasha Foundation, but now I'm an advisor helping to accelerate other companies. So I agree it's a comedy show. Keeps me laughing every day, but I'm still participating in it. And I would say there are a number of challenges. I mean, where do you start? And I've never been really traditional, and the people I work with aren't traditional at all. So I would say it's kind of hard for me to talk about the traditional side of things. But what I'm enjoying with the Akasha Foundation and the hub in Ireland is that the people make it at the end of the day, regardless of the money that's there or the structure, and it's just an amazing group of people, and sometimes things are hard, but when you have the right mix, miracles do happen and things can be achieved on massive levels. So.
Thank you, and you spoke earlier about being involved with the Ethereum startup, and obviously that was a unicorn. We heard earlier from Ian Dowson that I think 6.6 billion in the UK is invested in fintech startups, and UK's had a number of unicorns. So just in your experience, what do you look for? What do you think makes the next unicorn?
Well, from my perspective, unicorns to me are companies, and keep in mind I'm only in blockchain right now, but unicorns for me are the ones who have technology that can actually be applicable in humanitarian situations, for example, and just very real life, tangible cases. And that's partially because I have 10 years of experience with the UN, but I'm looking to reach people beyond our bubble, right? So we're working on accelerating one project that has to do with the supply chain and farmers in multiple places around the world. So to me, that's a unicorn. Maybe other people don't agree, but that's really important for me. And then on the other side of things, a unicorn for me is in the trading world, working with funds in the crypto space that are actually regulated. Right now, that's a unicorn, because there are a lot of funds out there that aren't regulated, and I'm looking to make my investors happy with the bells and whistles of a traditional investment firm. So,
I want to come back and talk to you a little about emerging markets, but I'd like to just see what Kevin, how do you find the next unicorn? What are you looking for? And Erin's actually been redefining the unicorns on the stage, so I welcome new definitions for unicorns.
Well, I guess I'm not sure if we actually need a new definition for unicorns. I think unicorns become so popular right now that there's no need to actually. We don't know if they are unicorns. I mean, if you've got just 25,000 unicorns in Europe, and and so on and so forth. So I guess there's a question around this, which doesn't mean that I disagree with what Erin said. I actually agree with it. In reality, I think we need to concentrate on zebra more than unicorns, and zebra are more kind of very much customer centric and creating value for all of the stakeholders of the companies, and not only the shareholders of the companies. And then this is very much where I agree with the impact that those new companies will have on emerging markets, because we will solve a lot of inequality problems with those new business models that are yet to be created. And I guess we would all agree here that we're only scratching the surface of what we can actually do with those new technologies. It's just that we have not had the right right mindset for and you can use the best tool to somebody who is used to a new tool is obviously not going to be able to do anything with blockchain, and that's what's been happening, and that's why we've seen a lot of ERC20 coins spin out on the web and so on and so forth, because people were trying to create previous business models with new technologies. It's almost like if you are trying to cut a tomato with a spoon, it doesn't work. The way we find companies that are successful, and they do not need to be unicorns to be successful. We are creating a portfolio of 1,000 companies over the next 10 years. And just to give you an idea of the scale of what we are creating, if you have not been in the VC world, that would take about 30 to 40 VCs to reach the same level of diversification. So we are basically three-dimension diversification. We are diversifying across stages, so we can invest from pre-Series B up to IPO. We are diversifying across all technologies, from quantum up to kind of very traditional technologies and very well-proven technologies such as machine learning. And then we are diversifying across sectors as well. So from fintech up to biotech. Right now we've got biotech and fintech companies in our portfolio. So if you acquire the security token that we have created, you get maximum diversification, and we'll be investing in 1,000 companies over the next 10 years.
So, but when you're actually looking at a company that you're thinking of bringing into your accelerator, what do you look for in the team?
Question for me, I guess.
Yeah, question. Well, I'm going to ask Erin as well, but I'll just ask you.
Well, first of all, I'm expecting the founding team to be extremely savvy and understand and have an extreme good understanding of their market. I want them to, if they do not talk to me about product, if you do not understand your market. So I think market is the first thing that we really look at. Do you really understand your market? And then do you have enough understanding to actually build a product? Because once you know the market and you know the problem you're solving in the market and you know the environment in which you are growing, then I can believe you are going to be creating a product that makes sense, right? Although, of course, there is a lot of companies that get lost in the weeds because they know their market, but they do not understand how to position their product in the market. So, of course, even if you are an expert in your market, that doesn't mean that you are going to be a successful entrepreneur. But at least you start by having a good understanding of your market. And then you have to understand the concept of product market fit, which is a different concept. And then we apply science to understand product, to help companies to understand their product market fit. And once you understand your product market fit, then you can think of actually developing a product properly. And that's pretty much the phases that we go through. So, and at the end of the day, we all know we invest in, sorry, it's a very long answer, but at the end of the day, our network have worked with more than 500 companies for the past 10, 15 years. And we do know that none of the companies are perfect and have 100% everything right. We do know they all have problems. We just need to know those problems because we've got the network to make sure you are going to be able to solve it and prevent instead of react. So.
Thanks. Erin, I'd love you to give us your viewpoint on what you look for in a team.
Well, I definitely agree with you because I've seen a number of projects that don't know their markets, and it can be devastating if they go out there for funding without knowing. I'm looking for a great, experienced team, people with humility, but also I am looking for people who know how to make a business plan and already have one. I've been finding over the past 6 months, looking at multiple projects, a lot of companies don't have a real business plan. They think that a deck is a business plan, and it's not. So, and it's an important process to go through. It's kind of like your master's degree, I think, as an entrepreneur, is to have a legit business plan. So.
Thank you. That's really interesting that you find that as a gap that people. It's a bit like the ICO days, isn't it? A good deck and a white paper of some description, you can get a lot of money. But I think you're telling me that those days are over.
Yeah.
So let's just go back because both of you have touched on it in some way. around the redefinition of unicorns and the value of companies that have an impact on broader social and humanitarian concerns. And one of the things I'd be interested in your commentary on is, you know, you're in Ireland, you're in London, you've got teams here. Some of the biggest problems in the planet are not in the UK, they're in Africa, they're in Asia, they're in India. And you talked about humanitarian and so forth. But what I'm seeing is the traditional development agencies and even governments to some extent are slow to embrace and really harness technology to solve problems in the way that we know that they can be solved. We had an interesting session this morning with John Kamara from Kenya, who was saying, we know what the problems are, we're building tech for those problems, so then there's 100,000 people who'll get on our platform right away because it's solving a problem. And I'd just be interested in any perspectives you've got on how to accelerate the development and adoption of technologies that can really solve some of the intractable problems of poverty, inequality, financial inclusion, you know, sustainable energy and any one of those things that you know we need to solve. So I'd love any thoughts on that.
Wow. Sorry. I think about this often, and because I worked in the UN for such a long time, I have some perspective on that. But it's, you know, it takes some serious leadership and organization, and one of the problems with the UN and pretty much all the big organizations is that they're so big and disjointed, right? The communications are lacking between departments. So I will say, however, though, I am happy to see the UN embracing the blockchain for delivery of food rations to Syrian refugees, for example, which Oxfam is also doing. So, you know, sometimes it's baby steps, and these are big concepts that these organizations are embracing. And honestly, over the past year, I think some of the best real-world uses for the blockchain have come from the NGOs in that respect. But yeah, it's definitely baby steps.
Kevin, I'd love to hear any perspective you've got on that.
Yeah, I guess the short answer is culture. The fact that we still kind of idealize, you know, in a big part of the world, you know, big car, big yachts, big houses, and so on and so forth, and tend to forget that, you know, the pot is limited, and, you know, the more you've got, the less the others have. And it's simply because we've built our society around those concepts. But I guess if we reinvent our most profound beliefs around what is true happiness, what is true wealth, then using some of those technologies, we will be able to bridge the inequality gap globally, and therefore we will be able to bring the emerging markets forward and in more aligned. Now, of course, it's a bit being a purist, me saying this, because we're seeing what's happening, you know, on both sides of the world right now, and there's a lot of speculation around what that virus is meant for, and is this just not an excuse to justify the slowdown, the global economic slowdown, so that we can print more money. Because if there is a slowdown, there's a button that all of our central banks know as we print more money, and that's great. But the problem is that we're playing a finite game here. This is going to end one day, and we've got to ensure that we can basically do better things, better innovation with the governments. I guess there is a lot of government involvement, especially in emerging countries, because in most emerging countries there is a lot of involvement of governments. So if we can essentially, you know, enable the governments to understand a bit more better the concept of innovation and the concept of wealth creation, and kind of move away from the politics, but very much kind of be very focused on solving real problems and have long-term views and positions, then I guess we can do some great stuff.
Erin, you look like you want to make a follow-up.
Yeah, I agree with all of that. It's definitely a cultural and mind shift. And on top of that, what I see a lot of is, you know, we're here in a room with people who are literate in blockchain technology, for example, to a certain level that most of the world is not. So it's also, taking some education. I mean, I know people working within different governments and corporations, and because this is my life, I've talked to them about blockchain, and they're still having a hard time understanding what it is and the potential of its impact. So there's still a bit of education going on, I'd say.
But I think it's more than education, because I think it's like envisionment, because someone used this analogy the other day about people trying to build a faster horse. It's actually not a horse. We have all of these other tools available, and how it's not just developing country governments, it's also our governments. How do you envision people about the possibilities? So I'd love to hear any comments that you've got. And Kevin, I would also love you to talk about this whole idea of innovation as an asset class, because it seems like we need a whole new set of thinking, and incremental approaches to education is not going to get us where the possibilities are, and having people see that.
I'm not sure how I can address your first question. It's a very tricky one, and I did not get prepared. So I will.
We'll take interventions from the audience as well.
Yeah, well, I guess that should be more conversation, since we can actually have a conversation. It's a very tricky one. I would not be able to tell how we can really change this. I think around your last question, which is about innovation as an asset class, and then kind of capitalizing on value, and this is where I'm obviously very interested, because there is a massive issue right now in the innovation and in the innovation economy, if you want to call it this way, define its venture capital industry or innovation economy or what have you. The concept that we have created to grow companies right now, it's extremely segmented, and everybody's got different interest. Everybody has a different agenda. The startups have their agenda, accelerators, incubators, they have their own agenda, VCs have their own agendas, the Ps have their own agendas, and so on and so forth. So everybody's got a different agenda, and we are all trying to kind of eat part of the cake. So the innovation as an asset class for me, the way we discussed it with Jane is, try to basically create an environment where we can dare to create the most exciting innovation and the most complex technologies in order to solve the biggest problems, whether we're talking about going to Mars or whether we're going to solve, pollution, right? The problems, the size of the problems are extremely big, and the way we finance and we grow those companies is so complex and so segmented that I see founders with very, very limited ambitions. They expect to be a unicorn. Some of those founders, they expect to be 100 million companies. Some are expecting to be a unicorn. I'm like, is that even a purpose? I mean, it's great if you are turning money. It's great if you can actually buy whatever you want at the end of your journey. But can you not focus on something which is much, much bigger than yourself? Let's just, go there, like I take an example, whether we like it or not, but look at Steve Jobs and Apple and Microsoft, for example. They were not trying to become a fucking unicorns, right? Because at this point there was no unicorn, right? Nobody was talking about unicorn back in the days. So they were trying to create something which was much bigger than themselves. And right now the whole societal construct of startup innovation, it's basically all around making quick money and then trying to kind of sell and so on and so forth. And that is obviously just a massive problem. And that's why we talk about the innovation as an asset class, because if we start to really enable entrepreneurs to focus on long-term view and solving big problems, then our planet is our greatest asset, right? We only have two greatest assets, right? Time and planet, right? All of the rest is just, it's secondary almost. So can we not focus on this for now?
Yeah.
Erin,
absolutely.
I'd love to hear your views on that.
I'm honestly tired of hearing the word unicorn, because like you were saying, everybody's trying to be a unicorn. Like, the unicorns are the ones who aren't trying to be unicorns or talking about it. Sorry. But, and I also lived in California for a while, in the VC community over there, and I never really found it too realistic. A lot of people running around name dropping Steve Jobs and Elon Musk all the time and not really doing anything but talking about those names. So I'm finding, though, that for me, people talk about innovation unicorns as if they're like pieces of technology, but I have a different opinion on that now. I feel like unicorns, or the people who are innovators, don't necessarily have anything to do with the technology, even if they have it within a company. Like, the people themselves are just as valuable and even more valuable than the technology. I recently had someone who almost invested in my company and said, well, your company is not worth £1 million because your technology is not, the technology that we're not using is not ours. But the people in my company and the structure that we've created and all their experience and time is definitely worth £1 million. So I think people need to be careful when they say, oh, well, you're a unicorn because you have this like funky piece of technology. Well, people are valuable too, and you wouldn't have that technology if it wasn't for the people, so.
Just the point I wanted to catch back on, Kevin, with you, and I think that this is one around this, how you envision people, because I think Steve Jobs was creating a future that didn't exist, and he was quite powerful in being able to get people to believe in that future. So maybe we'll just go and watch a few Steve Jobs videos and try and recreate it. But we've got a little bit of time left, so I'd love to give people in the room an opportunity to ask a question or to comment. So just up there, I think I've got the handheld mic, so I'll go to the podium. Oh, you've got another mic. Okay, just up the back there.
Can I make a comment just on what you said about Steve Jobs creating the future, basically? I think one of the biggest mistakes that most startups do really is focus on the product and not on the values behind the product. And sometimes, if you listen to what Steve Jobs has made, Steve Jobs has, of course, he has sold millions of iPhones, but in reality, he has sold the values around all of the product he could create. And so long as those values are consistent with his customer target, then he would be creating the future, right? But he was much more around the values than the actual product themselves. Because if you only focus on selling the product, then what happens when your product becomes obsolete, right? So it's all about that long-term value that we were talking about just earlier. Just don't. I'm not sure if you're trying to raise, for your own company right now, but do not get lost in the weeds of talking only about your product, because at the end of the day, your product has a cycle.
Yeah.
Thank you. So let's take the comment or question from the floor.
So whenever I've spoken to investors, they've talked about how they want to see exponential potential. And nearly all the projects I've worked on as a developer, it's hard work. There's a lot of issues to go through step by step in order to meet, the solution that we need to create for that particular problem we're trying to solve. And it sounds like, as you just said there, there's a lot of hard work, right, to create those good solutions. It's very frustrating to see investors saying, right, well, yours is not exponential, so we're not interested. I'd be interested to hear your, considering this is focused on unicorn, but a lot of these problems, like, the investments that you might make on particular problems, particularly in blockchain. So do you see opportunities within blockchain which are exponential rather than linear growth, because it takes effort to meet those solutions? What are your thoughts around that? Do you find exponential growth opportunities within
It was
blockchain?
yeah. It's very difficult to hear from you from here, but we'll catch it and we'll. So I'll repeat the question for everybody. Is basically how do you then obviously solve the problem of only having access to capital when you have an exponential growth, the reality is that the short answer to you, which is, comes down to your frustration using your own words, is that maybe you just don't need to raise money from VCs. There is one big mistake that, most entrepreneurs do, is that you need to go through VCs to raise money. VCs is one of the options that you've got to raise money, but VCs have some very clear expectations about your business. And if you do not meet those expectations, and if you do not have any intention to meet those expectations, you, by all means, should not maybe raising money from the VCs. Do not waste your time. They won't waste yours.
Any other question from the floor? Yes, up the front. The microphone coming.
Okay, hi, my name is Sunny. So I've got a question because I work for a cryptocurrency exchange. So we deal with startups who are looking for money, funding. So you said that you have an incubator?
Yeah, not totally, but yes, we help companies to grow.
Okay, so how's the market moving? How are the VCs? Because I live in Singapore. I travel to Southeast Asia a lot in Dubai. So I see the traditional VCs have the family offices, the hedge funds, they're moving into the crypto space, like tokenization and everything, real estate. So what's your take on that?
As far as VCs moving into the crypto space?
Do you see the same similarities in UK?
Yes. Yeah,
Yes.
I mean, what I'm seeing is worldwide. It's not limited to a country at this point. So
What's the drive here, basically worldwide?
Profit.
What's the drive behind investing in this new technology?
much higher profits than the traditional investment world. I mean, the returns within the crypto world right now are sometimes insane and unheard of sometimes, yeah.
Kevin, did you want to make a comment?
No, I echo what Erin said. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you.
Thanks.
So let me just start drawing the panel to a close. And one of the things that I'd like for both of you to give us your viewpoint on is obviously innovation, the startup ecosystem, helping it to grow and develop and getting successful future companies is critical to the UK and to most other parts of the world. So if you were having a fireside chat with Boris Johnson, what would you be telling him he needs to do in the UK to post-Brexit, put UK and keep UK right as a world leader in terms of innovation, technology, growing new companies? What would your advice to him be?
Well, I would probably say the same thing to Boris that I would say to my own president in America, and that's to keep
What was his name?
I can't remember, but yeah, so I would just say keep the borders open and let people come in, because that's one of the big, from my perspective, that's one of the biggest issues in my country, is that they want to kick everybody out, and it's a lot harder to get visas now, but most of our innovation has happened because people come from other countries. I've seen the greatest amount of innovation come from diversity and people from all around the world getting together. So I would say the same to Boris.
Yeah, that's a really great point. Kevin, what would you like to add?
Well, I'm not sure I would say the same thing to Trump and Boris, but just to focus on Boris for now, I think I would definitely say that his investment should be on the digital transformation and focus purely on transforming the economy, because it's going to be tough. The European Commission wants something bad about the UK right now, and the European Commission has so much at stake during Brexit that they will make it hard for the UK. Therefore, take this as an opportunity to create a very robust digital economy, which is getting an edge over what the other European members will have, because they won't be able to change that quick.
Thank you. Prime Minister Boris, please take note of that. You heard it here at the London Blockchain Summit, and thank you very much to our amazing panel. Thank you very much.
Thank
Big
you.
hand.